Hey there. How are you? No, like really, how are you? You know, I've noticed that maybe you're feeling a little stressed out lately, a little overwhelmed, and that's okay because you're not alone. It's been a little crazy, right? We have had a lot to process and a lot to deal with around us. And we've had all these great thoughts and feelings about the new year and all the things that we want to accomplish. And here we are, smack in the middle of the first quarter. And you might be asking yourself what you've accomplished, what you still need to do personally, professionally, and in all areas of your life. And look, at the end of the day, we all get overwhelmed sometimes, even with the best of intentions about how we want our life to look and how we want to manage our life, sometimes it can get a little unwieldy. So, again, I just want to support you and encourage you. And today we're going to talk about ways to overcome overwhelm. And even though it is part of life, and even though it is human to feel that way sometimes, I think that it's so important for us to know that we have the power to move through it. We have the power to get over it. And that's what I want to focus on today is giving you the tools to help you do that. See, when life gets overwhelming, it's important to remember you can control your reaction to the feelings that you're having at any moment. Because how you respond to life's challenges will determine everything your happiness, your fulfillment, and your success. So I'm sure this isn't the first time you felt stressed or anxious or maybe even overwhelmed this year, and it probably won't be the last. So I think it's important that we have the tools to work through it so that we can get back on track. Look, that's the key here. I want to give you the right mindset, the right approach, so that you can return to being your best self and operate from a place of energy, creativity, and confidence. So, a couple of things to keep in mind when you start feeling overwhelmed. I think the first thing is just to slow down and maybe take a pause so that you can reconnect with yourself. So, when you're aware of your feelings and you're starting to get anxious and you're starting to feel like a lot of things are piling up on you, just take a moment, take a deep breath, and reconnect with who you are and where you are at that moment. And another thing that can be so helpful to start to change what you're thinking is just to change your physical state. So it could mean taking a walk outside, getting some fresh air, just get up from your chair. Listen, sometimes I've just danced around the room by myself when no one was looking. It's just something that will change the way you're physically feeling so that you can start to shift your energy and your attention away from your emotions and just get back into your body. And then after a minute of that, you can probably get back into thinking and focusing on whatever it is that you're doing. The awareness, number one, is going to allow you to take control of the situation. With overwhelm, it starts to throw our minds into this negative feedback loop. It's when we start thinking about more things we need to do or more things that we're not doing, or it starts to take us into just thinking of the impossibilities around us instead of thinking about how we can accomplish whatever it is that we set out to do. So we just need to move our mind out of that because if not, the more stress we feel, the more stress we're going to create. So I find that there's usually three reasons why people get into overwhelm. The first reason is because they may not even be clear about what their goals are. And so they have all of these opportunities around them. They have all of these desires about their future. We start thinking about all the things that we want to do, but we don't really have a clear plan. And that can put you into overwhelm. So I think that if you can also take some time and really, again, look at your business or career, look at your personal goals, look at your health goals, your financial goals, and get into the habit of creating a goal that is attainable, that is smart. We've shared that acronym here before, and really just get clear about what it is that you want to accomplish. That is step one. Because when you know what you want to do, then you can figure out how to get there. And again, when we get overwhelmed, we tend to think that we don't have control. And so all the actions that we attach to our goals, all of the plans that we can make, it puts us back in the driver's seat. And that's really what we want to do. So, as you are clear about your goals, let's say for the year, then you can chunk them down and create some goals for the month, for the week. And what I do is I sit down on a Sunday and I figure out what it is that I need to accomplish this week. And I'm going to lead now into the second thing that I think gets us overwhelmed is when we're not clear about the priorities that we need to focus on in order to accomplish our goals. So you've created the goals, what it is you want to accomplish. Then you have to figure out what actions you need to take to get there. And by identifying those actions, you should be able to identify what the priorities are. And so we refer to that as understanding the 80/20 rule. The 80/20 principle is also known as the Pareto principle. It was discovered by an Italian economist, Pareto, a very long time ago. But what he really uncovered was that there was this predictable imbalance to life. In other words, when you look at your actions, not all of your actions are going to create the result or get you closer to the goals that you want. So it's understanding that not every activity is created equal. There are some activities that when you put your time and attention to it will move you much faster to your goals. And those activities are known as our 20%. And so those are our priorities. And it's important to know that you have time on your calendar for those priorities and that those things are happening first. And I think that when we focus a lot of time and energy in the 80% stuff, that can help us to feel a little overwhelmed because of a few things. I think because there's more stuff to do in the 80%. So that can feel a little overwhelming. And because it just doesn't really move us forward. It feels like sometimes we're just checking off boxes on a to do list, but it may not really equal progress. And so at some point that catches up with you and you realize that you're not moving as quickly as you thought you could towards your goals. And so you start to feel anxious and overwhelmed by that. And if we had only stayed really focused on our 20%, we probably would be further along. And listen, I understand because it is a little counterintuitive sometimes because in the 20%, the list is short. The list is short. It's probably one or two things that if you were to really commit to them daily, would actually really help you get to your goal much faster, right? So, for instance, if your goal is around weight loss, if you were to focus on the right nutritional plan and you were to focus on movement every day, that consistency and those two activities would move you to your goals probably much faster. And so there's only two things there, not 17. So in the 20%, you'll find that the activities are fewer, but they're much more significant because of what they can create in terms of outcome. So when we're not focused on the 80/20 rule and we're living in our 80%, I guarantee at some point you will feel overwhelmed by that. And then as you get to clarity around your 20% activities, it is important that you time block for those activities. And I think that's another thing that causes overwhelm for a lot of us is when we don't understand how to use our time and we don't understand how to associate our time with the right tasks. Time and task management have a profound effect on our productivity and staying in that zone, that productivity zone where we're getting results is going to keep our emotions in check and it's going to keep us out of feeling overwhelmed. So, if you take anything out of this week's podcast, I would say this: be fierce about learning how to manage your time. And of course, there's so many resources out there to help you with time management, but I will say that it's really more about your behavior around time than managing time itself, right? What we have to manage is us and how we use our time and how we discern what our priorities need to be in the time that we have to do them. So, as you develop a better understanding of how to manage your time and your tasks, it can create miracles, honestly, in terms of the results that you want to achieve. I think it's important as we're unpacking this today and really just getting honest about the fact that we all get overwhelmed at times, myself included. and that how we can work our way out of it. I think that we have to know it's always about our intention and it's always about staying connected to that intention. And I would also say it's about remembering why this is important because not only will we become more productive, but I just want to say, guys, our time is precious. And we only have so many hours in a day. We only have so many days in a month, so many weeks in a year, and we only have so many years to live. Yes, I said it. We have to be mindful of how precious our time is. And the other thing that is so precious is our energy. Now, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, it can only be transferred. And so we have to be mindful of how we're using our energy because we can be putting out a lot of energy. We can be giving a lot of energy to other things, other people. And it's important for us to know that we have to reserve some of that in order to accomplish the things we want to do. And so when you're feeling like your emotions are getting the best of you, when you feel anxious, when you're feeling overwhelmed, take a moment and just breathe. Take a moment. And as I said a few minutes ago, change your state, walk around, dance around, move your body, get outside, even if it is for just a minute or two. Learn that you can be your best advocate and that you can take control of a situation. You can take control of your body. You can take control of how you're breathing. You can take control of how you're thinking so that you don't have to feel like you're getting sucked into anybody else's chaos or even the chaos you might be creating in your own mind. So, as you start to recognize that, remember, you can't always believe everything that you're feeling. You might have to ask yourself, what is the root of some of these feelings? Why am I call it, right? Why is that the case? And if you can question it, you can usually find an answer. And so I think the third thing that can sometimes come into play and lead to feeling overwhelmed is our own habits around our behavior, not just in managing our time, but in how we manage relationships too. For instance, if you're someone who finds validation in being busy, and maybe you never thought about it before, but I want you to think about it. If you're someone who really enjoys putting a lot on a list or a lot on their calendar, or a lot on their plate, and you are someone who finds it hard to say no when people ask you to help or when they ask you to be a part of something and you wind up saying yes and yes. And listen, a lot of the yeses are exciting. A lot of the things you're agreeing to are probably in your wheelhouse. They're probably bringing you some joy. It's around the things you like to do. It could mean that you're using your talent, right? All of the above. Yet we have to know when we hit a limit. And it's not saying yes to one thing, it's saying yes to everything. And so we have to be honest about that too sometimes. And so we have to look at, are we getting validation? Are we getting a sense of self-worth by external means, external circumstances? And am I satisfying something by being busy only to lead me down a path of feeling overwhelmed at some point? And so that may be an opportunity for someone listening, I'm sure. And again, it's okay. I'm throwing you a big hug because we've all been there. It's just an opportunity to really, I think, get real with ourselves and recognize what might be getting in our way. So you might be asking yourself, what are some of the roots of overwhelm? And I think, again, it's often a result of the three things we talked about. So just to recap, I think it can be an inability to say no. And it could be saying yes to too many things and overcommitting and overextending yourself and putting everyone else first. And that can lead to overwhelm because what that will do over time is drain you. It drains you of your resources, it drains you of your energy, and it just puts you lower and lower on the list. And so, as you do that, you are pouring into everyone else, and then your cup is empty. And so the key is to avoid doing that because you want to avoid overwhelm. And so I think it's important to think about this cup that we have, right? And understand ways that we can fill our cup through our own personal development, spiritual development, exercise, meditation, right? All the things that can fill your cup. And know that there's so much abundance in the world. And I believe that's partly why we tend to give so much, is because we are abundant thinkers. What I want you to think about is this: continue filling your cup until it overflows. Fill your cup until that thing is just flowing out, and it's the overflow that you give to others so that your cup never runs dry. And that's not selfish. That's just really putting yourself first. Two different things. Self care is never selfish. Self preservation is never selfish, because if you don't take care of you, the golden goose, remember that story? If you don't take care of you, you won't be able to serve others. And I know that's important to you. So remember, that is a key. The other thing that we talked about today that gets in our way and creates overwhelm is not managing our time or our tasks well enough. And so it's about understanding how to identify priority, understand what's in our 20%, stay focused there. Because here's the thing: when you stay focused in your 20% activities, just to go back to that for a minute, you will create solutions, you will create other opportunities that will start to take care of the 80% stuff anyway. I want you to realize that by focusing on those priorities, everything else becomes less important and maybe even unnecessary at some point. So, time and task management is another thing that can support you or lead to overwhelm, depending on how well you're doing it. And then the third thing we talked about is just really staying focused on how we're thinking and just staying focused on our thoughts, right? Because our thoughts become our reality. Whatever you're thinking at any moment becomes your truth. And so, as you raise your awareness to all the things we're discussing, I want you to start to pay attention to how you're thinking and the things that you're saying to yourself. And ask yourself honestly if those thoughts are supporting you, or if those thoughts are throwing you into some chaotic thinking, if those thoughts are creating more overwhelm. Because when we spend a lot of time focusing on things that are out of our control, we give away our power. And as we give away our power, we feel less capable to really handle the things that might come up. We feel less equipped to process challenges and adversity. And we might feel like we are just drowning in that sense of overwhelm. And I want to say that by recognizing what you're thinking, by really asking yourself, where are those thoughts coming from when you identify that they're a little negative or limiting, then working to redirect your thinking to the things that are in your control, that's going to put you back in the driver's seat. And that's going to allow you to find solutions, and that's going to allow you to move forward. And it's going to minimize those anxious feelings, because a lot of times, if you really look at your own pattern of thinking, when you are feeling anxious, you are more than likely worrying about something that hasn't even happened, that may not even have the potential to happen, and you start thinking too much about stuff in the future. And what we need to do is bring our attention back to the moment that we're in, back to the present, and start to identify what is available to us at this moment. What is it that you can do, and what is it that you are willing to do, and put your time and energy there? Because otherwise you're spiraling into some thinking about things that are just out of your control, which is making you feel like you have no options, making you feel like you have no choices, none of which is true. You always have a choice, you always have an option, you always have the ability to move. You are not helpless. And even though it might be a little hard or challenging or unclear, that's okay. Just know you always have the power to move forward and make change happen. Therefore, if you can focus on that, you should start to feel like you can remove those feelings of just overwhelm and creating those negative emotions. I know that our conversation today is definitely working and creating a lot of thoughts for you. And I want you to also keep in mind that the key to coming out of overwhelm is not to do more. In other words, even though I'm talking about a lot of things that you can shift in terms of your thinking and in your actions. And we're talking about identifying your 20%, and it's just putting your time and energy into the right activities. What I'm not saying is get busier. What I'm not saying is to dial up the hustle, because that's probably going to lead to more overwhelm and ultimately burnout. I think that there's a temptation there, right? Because we think if we can keep working through this, I'll be okay. And the way to work through it sometimes could be to just take a moment, as we said earlier, and for you to take a mental time out, for you to be able to even take a physical time out for a few minutes. And I think it's important for a lot of us who are probably high achievers to understand that. And it's not about trying to work harder. I think it's about working smarter. I feel that we're all in this place at one time or another. And as I said earlier, we'll probably find us here again at some point. So when you find yourself in this place of overwhelm, just be kind to yourself. Give yourself a little grace. Remember that progress does take patience sometimes, and that we just can't tell ourselves that we have to do everything at once, that we also can't be focused on striving for perfection, because it's the progress that really makes things happen. And there's power in marginal gains. There's power in the concept of gradually and then suddenly, right? Because gradually means that we're moving towards the goal little by little, but then all of a sudden you feel it and you see the progress that you've made. So I think it's important to understand your own behavior around your goals and how you're approaching it, and just get very clear and specific about what you can do and what you are willing to do that is within your priorities, and time block for it so that you have the clarity around managing your actions and your time, which also I think will help you to be more productive, which can keep your mind from just going in a million directions off track, right? Because you're really focused on the time and the task at hand. So I think that's important too. So listen, smile, enjoy the ride. You have amazing things that you are going to accomplish. And I know that. And I think that every day is a new day filled with opportunity and filled with a lot of promise. So just have some fun doing what you're doing and remember why it's important to you. Remember what that motivation is, because that'll help you also get back on track. So I'm excited for us. It's going to be a great year. I believe that we have so many things that we can create together and individually. So I'm here to tell you that I love you. Keep up the good work. I can't wait to see what you do this year. It's your time. So go for it. It's time to move on and for us to really, I think, design the life that we want, because it's so worth living. Thanks for joining me, guys. I'll see you next week.